Hi, everybody. My name is Carl Darden, and I'd like to welcome and thank all of you for joining us today here on Navy Sports Central. I am your host, and this is the official podcast of the Navy Sports Nation, where we take a deeper dive into Navy sports. In this episode, we're going to focus exclusively on the huge Army-Navy soccer game coming up this weekend in Philadelphia, and we'll be joined by a former Navy player who'll be giving us his insight and analysis on what's shaping up to be a great contest. So stick around. This is going to be fun. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Obviously, a pretty quick turnaround between this episode and our last one, which I just released 4 days ago. But I wanted to get this preview of the Army-Navy men's soccer game out there to you before I head to Annapolis myself in a couple of days. Like I said, the plan is to pretty much spend the entire episode discussing the team and the matchup, but I did want to get in one quick sports update to let you know how the sprint football game against Army turned out over the weekend. Some of you may know already that the Mids did come away with the win on the road, but like I mentioned in the last episode, these games are so unpredictable. Both teams lit up the scoreboard in their first couple of games, and even though the competition may have been a little bit light, I would have sworn that based on how the offenses were performing, that both teams would have at least put up about 30 points. But just like last year, it turned out to be a real defensive battle. Not only did Navy's defense hold Army to 6 points, but they completely shut down their rushing attack. The Black Knights finished the game in negative territory as far as rushing yardage was concerned, going for negative 10 yards on 34 carries. Now, as far as Navy's offense was concerned, their running game was just efficient enough. They picked up 70 yards on the ground, and then Navy quarterback Brandon Atwood passed for 128 yards and a touchdown to get the win. But it was the defense and the special teams that made sure Army had no chance. The defense sacked the Black Knights quarterback 4 times, and the special teams blocked 1 field goal and 1 punt in what was just a dominating performance. Keep in mind, these two teams could wind up facing each other again in the college sprint football championships. But for now, the Mids are preparing for their next game, which is on the road this Saturday against Alderson Broaddus University in West Virginia. All right, I know that wasn't as long as the usual update, but I really want to get into our discussion on the Navy men's soccer team with our guest. So we're going to step away for a short break and then jump right into things. So stay with us. Okay, now it's time for our deep dive segment. When I took a look at the Navy men's soccer roster over the summer, my first thought was, this was a team that could not wait for the season to get started because last year everything got pushed to the spring, first of all. But Coach O'Donohue and his guys made a great adjustment and they won their first 4 games. Unfortunately, that March lockdown seemed to really disrupt their offensive rhythm because they only scored 1 goal in their last 3 games on the way to an 0-2-1 finish, and that included a very disappointing loss to Army. But the good news is they only had to wait 3 months instead of the usual 8 or 9 to get back to business, and as they start getting deeper into their schedule, the Mids are looking like they could go pretty deep into the Patriot League tournament, and they could even wind up winning it. Joining me today to help us learn a little bit more about this team is a former Navy soccer player who played all 4 years at Annapolis. He started off playing baseball growing up and then transitioned to soccer to stay active in the off-season. From there, it became his primary sport, and he wound up leading his high school team to the city championship game 2 years in a row. At the academy, he played both the forward and the midfield position and was part of the team that earned a hard-fought win over Army in his last star match as a senior. So I'm very happy to welcome my friend and classmate Chris McKenna to the Navy Sports Central podcast. Chris, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk Navy soccer with us as we head into the big game.
Well, thanks very much, Carl. It's my pleasure to be with you. I love the podcast.
Thanks, man. That's really good to hear. So, we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. And I know that, when I was growing up, baseball was my sport, okay? And my dad was in the military, so we lived on a bunch of military bases and such. I didn't really see a lot of soccer being played. And I was wondering if that was the case with you and basically how you got interested in playing soccer and just kind of give me a little bit of background there.
Yeah, well, I grew up in the Bronx, in the Throgs Neck section of the Bronx, and it was, a pretty ethnic neighborhood, not a recent immigrant neighborhood. So it was very German, Irish, Italian, recent first generation, second generation immigrants. So there was a lot of soccer around me growing up, and I know that was unusual for the country. But my dad played baseball growing up, so I started out as a little kid playing baseball, and he had me just join a soccer team in the off season just to stay athletic. And I found that I liked soccer a lot better, so I kind of just concentrated on soccer after that.
Yeah, and what was it that you liked about it that was better? I can tell you, I can think of many times when I was in Little League in the outfield, just like, picking the grass and
Yeah,
looking up at the sky and stuff like that. So what was it that attracted you to soccer?
that was the big thing. I loved baseball, but I loved baseball when I was running the bases or running for a fly ball or something like that. But it just didn't seem like there was enough of that for me, And when we got involved in soccer, I was running all the time. You're always running. You're either running with the ball or you're running off the ball. And if anytime you're not running in a soccer game, you're probably doing something wrong. So
Right, right.
I really enjoyed that part of the sport. Yeah.
Right, right. So you started playing and then just the interest grew. And of course, you carried that into high school. So tell me a little bit about playing in high school and then what eventually led you to the Naval Academy.
Sure. So I played probably earlier than most kids. Played what everybody calls a travel team now, travel leagues. We called it club ball. So I played on clubs, and we went basically all over the tri-state region doing that. And played in high school, and we did well. And I was on a good team in high school. We made it to the city championships my junior and senior year, and I scored a couple of goals in those games and got some interest from college coaches. But they were the regional college coaches for New York. So
Right.
it was a lot. It was interest from a lot of schools that I wasn't really interested in going. And I always wanted to go to the Naval Academy. It just since I was a little kid, I wanted to go there. But one of the kind of the funny things was because it was in New York, I got a lot of interest from the West Point coach, and he would, senior year, he would call me up at night, and he'd send all kinds of stuff about how great West Point was, and I applied to both, but never heard from the Navy coach. No interest there. My father recommended to me one day, you know what, you should send him a resume. You shouldn't wait for him to call you. You should send him a resume, and just at the bottom of it, put, I'm being actively recruited by West Point. And I got a call from him that week, So Dad was wise that time, So,
Right.
Anyway.
That's good. That's good. So what I'm hearing here is that now, so what he gave you a call and said, hey, you need to come here. And when you got there, tell me a little bit about the experience itself. What was the team like, and just your overall impression?
Yeah, it was. I would say it was kind of intimidating because when I first got there, I joined a team that had started 9 freshmen the previous year.
Wow.
So the class of '83 was a really, really strong recruiting class. So that's kind of tough to break into that. And Coach Myers, a legend, a great coach, one of the most knowledgeable soccer coaches I've ever seen. But he didn't suffer mistakes. He didn't suffer fools. So it was a little bit of an intimidating situation at first, and it did. It took me a couple of years to break into that team on a regular basis. But
Right. So when I look at this year's team, you have some pretty good balance there. Okay, they've got 6 shutouts so far, and we're just kind of hitting the halfway point in the season overall, and they're just kind of getting into the Patriot League schedule. But their defense is really strong, and the offense, what I've seen is they just keep constant pressure. I mean, I looked at their stats, and they take twice as many shots as their opponents, like over 16 compared to just a little over 8. So when you look at their style of play, how does it compare to the teams that you played on?
Yeah, that's absolutely the case, and it's completely different. Coach Myers, when I was there, his strength, or the strength of his teams, was an airtight, solid defense that never bent and absorbed pressure the whole game. Probably ceded possession to the other teams that, to be honest, were generally technically better than we were, and he would have his couple of forwards just kind of spring-loaded to to hit them with a quick counter when they overextended. So really, the Navy teams I played on were very defensive heavy. We always played a 4-4-2 or even like a 4-5-1, but very, very defensive, defensively strong formations. And we just looked for a mistake from the other team before we would really go forward and go for the jugular. Whereas that couldn't be further from the case, really, since the coach before, Coach O'Donoghue, took over, Coach Brandt. He kind of came in and he was going to take Navy soccer in a different direction, and I think largely successfully. He took them to the third round of the NCAA tournament the year before he left. He actually was scooped up by a professional team, but yeah, they're just a much more balanced team now than they were when I played. You know, they don't really worry about absorbing pressure like we did, because they're going to go out there and put the pressure on the other team, and they've got the talent to do it. Really, they're a far more talented group, really, than we were.
Yeah, and we'll get into that here just in a second when we start going over the players. But you're right. I mean, when you told me that the class in front of you, class of '83, how highly recruited they were and how many started as freshmen, this team kind of has a similar look when it comes to underclassmen starting. So, and that's a good segue into what we're going to jump into now. So, yeah, let's go ahead and just talk about some of these players, and we can start with the forwards. The first guy is Sidney Paris. His family lives in Ontario, Canada now, and he's played all over the place. A lot of international experience. He's got 4 goals on the year, including a really nice one last week against Lafayette. And he's also got 4 assists, too. Paris is clearly offensive-minded. So I was wondering if you can kind of share with us some of the things that forwards need to be able to do to be a legitimate scoring threat.
Yeah, sure. I think there's kind of, you might call it 3 typical forwards. One of them is the poacher, the guy that just has this sixth sense. He's always kind of hanging around that last defender, and he's looking for anything knocked down by the goalkeeper, and he's going to pounce on it. The second is the typical, they call him in soccer a number 9. So a tall, strong, good header, someone who is a presence in the box, and anything in the air is his. And then there's kind of the number 10, as they refer to in soccer, just the consummate dribbler, the guy with all the technical ability, the quickness, the creativity. I think Paris, really, he's the first one and the third one combined. He's not that big, so he's not a intimidating presence in the box, but he's got that sixth sense, that poacher's sense about him. But he's also got really refined skills, and he's got the quickness to put those skills to use. And what really impresses me about him is he scores goals not only in the run of play, but he scores them off set pieces too. His free kicks are kind of eye-watering. He bends them around walls, and I don't see too many players that have the ability to do both of those things, and he does.
Right.
So really impressive guy, really exciting guy.
Yeah, I mean, that goal he scored against Lafayette just came off a ridiculous angle.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't look like he had any shot at all, and he still managed to find a way to slide it past the goalkeeper.
He squirted it through, yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, next we have Baba Kali. He is another sophomore, and he had an impact almost immediately as a freshman. He played in all 7 games, and this year so far he's got 3 goals for a total of 6 points. What do you like about him after seeing him in action so far?
Well, I think he's more of that second category I told you, the number 9 player. He's a physical presence. He's very confident. He's very physical, and when he gets up ahead of steam, it kind of looks like a freight train running with the ball.
Right.
And he's got that. Reminds me of Didier Drogba. If you're an international soccer fan, somebody who just brings a lot of athleticism, and with that athleticism and with that strength and speed, he's got a reasonable amount of skill to put it all together. Right. So, yeah, he's a really good weapon. I don't think he's the same kind of a player as Paris, but a very good weapon to have.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, and our third forward is Jacob Williams. He is a senior, and here's a guy that when I've seen him in the games, is what I would call in basketball a volume shooter. Okay, he gets a lot of shots off. He gets them, heading towards the goal, and I think he only has like one, maybe two goals so far this year, and he's taken at least twice as many shots as everybody else. But that might not necessarily be a bad thing. I'm wondering anyway. So I was wondering if you could kind of speak to that sort of strategy when it comes to the forward position and putting a lot of shots on the goal.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's not a bad, and it might actually be by design. I don't have any insight into Coach O'Donoghue's tactics, but he may be telling him just take all the shots, take all those low probability shots. If you can get them on frame, and you can get the goalkeeper to knock them down, maybe we can follow it and ram it home, or maybe you can take a deflection off a defender, and we'll squirt a few goals in with that. And that is a philosophy that some players play with. Now sometimes the other players can get a little frustrated by somebody taking low probability shots like that instead of laying it off to someone with a better position, but. It's a valid tactic, and so far I think it's worked for them. They've gotten a lot of deflected goals and rebound goals this year.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, I tell you what, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break now, and when we come back, we'll continue with our look at the Navy men's soccer team and our preview of their big match against Army this coming Saturday. All right, welcome back to Navy Sports Central, everyone. My name is Carl Darden, and we are joined by my classmate and former Navy soccer player Chris McKenna as we continue checking out this year's team ahead of this Saturday's Army-Navy Star match. So, Chris, let's go ahead and move on to the midfielders. Our first one is sophomore David Jackson. He is from Cypress, Texas, and is currently second on the team in points with 3 goals and 3 assists for a total of 9 points overall. So when we compare the forwards and the midfielders, what are some things that a midfielder needs to be able to do that's a little bit different from the forward in order to be effective?
So, I mean, just basically a midfielder, especially this tandem pair that I think we're about to talk to is Coelho and Jackson. They kind of play in tandem, with Jackson playing more of an attacking midfielder role and Coelho playing more of a defensive midfielder role. Mm-hmm. And but in both of their cases, midfielders have more defensive responsibilities, or they have defensive responsibilities that the forwards don't have. They have very much the same skill set when they're on the ball, but when they're not on the ball, they've got to get back behind the ball and fill defensive roles. But I really like the way that these two guys. They have a clearly delineated responsibilities in the midfield, with one of them clearly being a defensive-minded midfielder, and Jackson being a more creative, attacking, going toward the goal more, but still having those defensive responsibilities. And the link-up play is really what the forwards don't really very often get involved in link-up play or distribution, whereas the midfielders, that's kind of their stock in trade.
Yeah, and the one thing that's kind of interesting about that pair of Jackson and Coelho is that they both played together in Texas as high schoolers on the same club team. So they've had a lot of experience playing together, and it's kind of neat to see them, on the same field playing for the Naval Academy. So to your point, he is a little bit more of a defensive player, it looks like. And the one thing I've seen is that he always seems to be in the right place at the right time. Even as a freshman, he had a big impact. He played every single minute of 5 of those games in that pandemic shortened season. So they do rely on him. That's pretty clear. The one thing I wanted to ask you is, as a defender, you know that the stats aren't really set up to capture, what you do on the field. And one of the things I can think of is, it was a game against LaSalle. Now, Coelho did get credit for this one because it was an assist, but he actually, the ball came out of their end and Asita got it to him, and then Coelho cleared it up the field to Baba Kali, who ran it down and then ended up scoring. So Coelho got the assist for that, which is great. But that's kind of a rarity. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that we can do as fans to kind of appreciate a little bit more about how defenders play the game.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's that specifically that defensive midfielder position is kind of it's hard to use stats to judge the value of or judge the quality of a play of a defensive midfielder. And I think Coelho is a great example of that, because to me, he's been one of the most impactful players on this team, game in and game out. He's that engine in the midfield that is always hunting the ball when we don't have it, and he wins the ball back. And if he doesn't win the ball back, he harasses the guy with the ball to the point where he makes a mistake, and regains possession for us, and then makes that first pass. And that first pass is always the most important pass. That first pass gets the attack going, and it's hard to quantify that. And I don't know a way to fix that. It's just that coaches are very good at identifying that. And I can tell you, as somebody who appreciates it when I was playing, the players absolutely appreciate it, because you know who that guy is. You know who that energy pack is, that Energizer Bunny. And to me, that's this kid. That's what he does for this team.
Right. Yeah. So I'm thinking, especially when we're, as they look to the Army game, somebody like him can make all the difference in the world, and he's got, 1 year experience under his belt. So
absolutely,
hopefully that'll be something that really is a difference maker. All right, good stuff. Now, these next two guys we're going to talk about together because they've been teammates since they were freshmen. Both seniors now, both first team All Patriot League, and I'm talking about Matt Nicita and Tyler Collins. And I remember when I saw a photo of Nicita the first time last year, I thought there's something wrong with the camera, because I'm looking at all these guys that are about 5'10", 6 feet tall, and then boom, all of a sudden you see a dude that's 6'8". So first of all, have you ever played with anybody that tall before? And secondly, what kind of problems does a defensive pair like this create for the other team?
Yeah, sure. And I never played with or against anybody that big. That's like you say, that's unusual for a soccer player. It reminds me a lot of Joe Greenspan, who played for Navy back when they made that historic run to the third round of the NCAAs. And he actually played professionally in the MLS after that. But when you have a center back pair like these two guys, and they are impressive, they shore up the defense and they own the box in the, at least aerially. So I would guess that it's a very rare thing for an opponent to score a headed goal against Navy, because these guys just own the box in the air. You're going to have to beat them with your feet. One thing that impresses me about Nicita too, and it was the same thing that impressed me about Greenspan when I watched him, was for a guy that big, his soccer skills are very refined. He's got some skills, and a lot of times the big players I've played against, that was not the case. But yeah, they're an impressive center back pairing, and they the fact that they are that good, it leaves those outside backs to go forward and really press the attack, which gives the team another dimension that I think a lot of teams don't have.
Right. Yeah, because Collins, right next to him, he goes 6'3" himself, so he's no little guy. And the one thing I noticed, at least in their defensive setup, and I'm no expert when it comes to this, I'm a little bit better when it comes to defensive schemes in basketball and lacrosse. But one thing I noticed is in front of the goalkeeper, they, at least on one or two occasions, they would have four guys lined up in front of him, and then Nicita and Collins would be the two interior guys. So I was wondering, just if you could share with us some of the advantages that gives a defense when you have guys of that caliber basically anchoring the interior of your defense, and what are some other, what else could possibly be going on there? As the action picks up, do they kind of look to match up with players, or is it more of a zone thing, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think usually it's a zone deal. Usually it's they'll have areas of responsibility, and that can change, obviously, and then you'll actually see them pass off pass off a mark to the other player too. So the only time that kind of changes is if there is a real prolific scorer on the other team, somebody we're worried about. Every now and again, you'll man up, you'll go man on that, but usually it's a zonal thing. But I would to the first part of your question, I would say because those two are so solid, and again, it's a different game than it was when I played in college. When I played in college, we played 4 defenders too, but those 4 defenders almost never went on the other side of the halfway line. It was, defenders just didn't score. It just didn't happen. It was kind of almost like a goalkeeper scoring. Well, these guys both score goals. So now it's mostly on set pieces. We'll bring the big men forward on the set pieces because that's generally going to wind up in a heading situation. But in addition to the big men, as I mentioned before, because they are so good and so solid, it frees up those outside backs, and they're really playing more as wingers at times. They're kind of on the opponent's 18-yard box, which again, when I played, you never would have seen, but it's part of the modern game is that those outside backs, if you've got a solid enough center back pairing, they can join the attack.
Right. Yeah. And, to your point, I mean, just a couple of games ago, I think it might have been against LaSalle, but Nicita had a really nice header in a set piece situation that resulted in a goal. Okay. Next, we got the goalkeeper, Tyler Fanning. He's a senior from Victoria, Minnesota. He is having a really good year, having recorded 6 shutouts among the mid's 8 wins so far. And here's another guy with some size. He's 6'4", goes about 190. And the one thing I noted is that he's pretty good about getting off his feet. He's got some pretty good hops. He's able to redirect shots over the crossbar, that sort of thing. So definitely athleticism is a big plus. But Chris, I was wondering if you could discuss some of the technical aspects of being a good goalkeeper based on what you've seen over the years. Are there specific things to keep in mind as far as where he needs to position himself depending on what's going on in front of him? What are some areas where he needs to be really sound in order to increase his chances of stopping a shot?
Sure. And I'm absolutely no goalkeeping expert. I've never played the position, but the one thing I think to appreciate is, again, it's a completely different position than it was when I played, because back in 1992, I think it was, FIFA changed the rules and you could no longer kick the ball back to the goalkeeper who could pick it up.
Oh.
So now that just changes everything because when we were under a lot of pressure, if we had a clear run toward the goalkeeper, we would pass it back. He'd pick it up, punt it down the field.
Got it.
And it just was an immediate pressure relief. Well, you can't do that anymore. If you kick the ball back to the goalkeeper, he's just a field player now. So that goalkeeper has really become the 5th defender in many ways. So back when I played, a goalkeeper just had to be a superb shot stopper. Now he's absolutely got to be that, but he's also got to be a total soccer player too. So that's one thing that impresses me is that a lot of times when those guys get the ball, and I haven't seen Fanning a bunch, but I have seen him play it with his feet a few times. When they get the ball, a lot of times it's under a lot of pressure, and he's acquitted himself well with that. He is, it would be easy to you're the last line of defense there. It'd be easy to kind of bobble that thing and really wind up looking silly, and he hasn't done that. So he's got the soccer skills that it takes, in addition to being that shot stopper that you still have to be. But yeah, they have to kind of run the show back there, especially on set pieces. That hasn't changed on any kind of set piece play. When we're defending a set piece, he's got to set the defense. He's got to work the angles. He's working those guys left, right, and then he's playing the odds with that angle where to position himself, and I think he does a pretty good job of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we didn't get a chance to cover all of the players, but those are several of the ones who are probably going to figure into the Army game coming up and certainly the rest of the season. So, Chris, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on them. And now let's just talk a little bit about the game itself. Recently, the things haven't really gone the best for the Mids. Last time they won was in 2014. And since then, they are 0-4-2. So a couple of ties in there. But last spring, they had an opportunity. They got off to a really good start last season. Again, it was shortened to seven games. But right after they had the lockdown in March, I think they just kind of ran out of gas because they had trouble getting the ball in the goal. So they ended up losing 2-0 to Army, which was a little bit disappointing considering the great start they'd gotten off to earlier in the year. Now, based on what you've seen so far, Chris, what are some of the things that the team just absolutely have to get done to bring that star back to Annapolis?
Yeah, I guess, I wish if I had the answer to that, I'd probably have Coach O'Donoghue's job. I think I think the biggest thing though is that and this probably hasn't changed. The biggest thing is that game is different. So they always said we have two seasons at Navy. You have your season, and then you have the Army game. And I remember that very vividly. The Army game is different, and the stuff that worked for you during the season may not work in that game. So I think that the key to that game, at least it was when I played, and the ones I've seen, is the team that makes the fewest mistakes is going to win that game. Mm-hmm. I think because both teams are, especially this year, both teams are really good. Both teams have great records, have won most of their games. They're scoring a lot of goals. They've got really solid defenses. So I think the key to that game is who can stay focused, who can not let the event overcome them, and who can make the fewest mistakes. Incidentally, I was at that 2014 game. The Army-Navy Classic or the Army-Navy Bowl, I forget what they call it, but it's not the ones like it's not like it was when I played, where we alternated, went to West Point, Annapolis. It's every year. It's in Philadelphia now. It's at Subaru Park. It's at an MLS quality stadium, and every year it's either the highest attended or one of the highest attended college soccer games in the country. About 10,000 people there. So
wow.
for these guys, it's the biggest game that they'll probably ever play in. There's a lot of pressure, and like I say, it's just keeping your focus and knowing that it's going to be a different game, knowing that they're gonna play you different than any other team because they want it as much as you want it. But
right.
I don't know and I know these guys are extremely well coached, so I know that Coach O'Donoghue will impress that on them. But I wish I had I wish I knew what to say that they needed to do to beat Army, because Army is this year a very good team as well.
Right.
And I guess the one thing that worries me is the one loss the Mids have this year is to Boston College, a team that Army has beaten. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't bode well. But then again, Army played them at home, and we had to play Boston College at Boston on turf with a 2-hour lightning and rain delay. So maybe that's not the best gauge there, but
right.
Yeah, we'll see. I got my fingers crossed anyway.
Yeah. So the one last thing as it relates to the Army-Navy game, and because we kind of spoke to the talent that a lot of these underclassmen have, and most of the sophomores, like I said, have played in the game already, so that's going to hopefully help them a little bit. And then you got a guy named Charlie Creel, who is a freshman, who he's got a goal this year, and he's gotten some real quality time out there on the field. What advice would you have for a freshman who just is going to be out there for the first time, in that moment, in terms of just kind of keeping things under control?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. It's the advice I think I would give him is to just take a few deep breaths. It's the biggest game it's going to be the biggest game you've ever played in. The pressure is going to be high, and you've just got to kind of try to shut all that out and keep playing the way you've been playing. And it's kind of interesting because I believe he's got a brother on the team too, an older brother. So I think that he will have heard that already, but not everybody. You have to experience it. I'll never forget my first experience with it. It was the biggest game I'd ever played in, and it was nowhere near the big game that it is now.
Right. Okay. All right. That sounds great. Yeah. So the mids have done a great job all season long so far, keeping pressure on the defenses, and hopefully the interior defense will continue to maintain the consistency it has, and we'll see if they can put things all together and bring that star back to Annapolis. So thanks, Chris, for that insight. Really appreciate it. Okay, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break, but stay with us because our lightning round segment is next. Okay, everybody, welcome back to Navy Sports Central. Carl Darden here with you, and I'm with Chris McKenna, who is my classmate and a member of the Navy soccer team while we were at the academy. Chris giving us some really great insight in the run-up to the Army-Navy game. So, Chris, what I want to do now is just something that I have a lot of fun with the folks that come on and chat with me, and it's kind of our little lightning round questions. So, basically, I've got about 8 or 9 or so that I'm going to throw at you here. Just give me the answers that kind of pop into your head, and we can get into some of them in a little bit more detail if we need to. But I'll just go ahead and just kind of get going here. So here we go. Okay, your favorite teammate when you played at Navy?
I would have to say. Well, I mean, I had so many great friends on that team. I would have to say my favorite player would be Jim Voltier.
Uh-huh.
He's just the iconic Navy athlete. He might not have been the most talented player on the field, but nobody ever outworked him. He was athletic and physical and committed and just tough mentally and physically, and never had a bad game because he wouldn't allow himself to have a bad game.
Right. Yeah, I remember Jim. Actually, I think we had a few classes together, especially early on, but we were different majors. But I definitely remember having a few classes with him. Really, really good guy. Okay, longest goal you've ever seen scored in a game you played?
Well, usually those are flukes. I scored a goal like that in high school, and I actually wasn't trying to score a goal. I think I was about 40 yards out, and I was trying to cross the ball into the box for one of my teammates to head it, and it caught a tailwind, and the goalkeeper got screened, and it floated in there, and nobody was more surprised than I was. It was just a fluke.
Okay.
But yeah, that was about the longest one there.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Favorite professional player?
Oh, probably the same as most people. Lionel Messi. I think he might be the best player ever to play the game. He does things with the ball that defy physics, defy logic, but he makes them work. And he's humble. And he's humble as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One play of yours, actually, you may have touched on it already, but I'll put it out there anyway. One play of yours, whether it's a goal, assist, or a defensive play that ranks in your top 5. And a little bit of background, what happened and what was the result?
Well, I would say I got an injury toward the back part of the season, my senior year. I wound up tearing some ligaments and wound up on crutches, and I missed about 4 games. Mm-hmm. But by the time I came back, there were only 2 games left, and obviously the last game was the Army game, and I was determined I was going to play in the Army game. But by the time I came back, I had lost my starting position because that's how college athletics are. It's time, tide, information, wait for no one. So it's next
right.
man up, So I was on the bench I think it was UMBC. I was on the bench on that next to last game, didn't get the start. And I'm sitting there just worried that I'm not going to get in that last game. So in the second half, Coach Myers looked down at me, sent me in there, and I went in, and I wasn't on the field for 3 or 4 minutes when I just caught a break, and I think it was Rob Sissel floated across into the box. I got in between the 2 center backs, goalkeeper charging out at me. I got my head on it just before he creamed me. Took me out. I had no idea where the ball went. I didn't see it. I just went down and kind of like a truck hit me. But I could tell by my teammates' reaction that it had scored. Uh-huh. And I remember before I got up, I said, "Well, now I know I'm going to get a chance to play in the Army game." So
right.
That's the one I remember. Yeah.
Right. Okay, most satisfying win over a team as a mid other than Army.
Other than Army. I would say it was the Penn State game our senior year. I think that was one that we were not favored to win. And we played that game on the AstroTurf field behind 8th Wing there. And it was early in the season, so it was about 80 degrees out. And, the turf's always 10 degrees hotter on the turf. So it was one of those ones where if you looked at them man for man, they were better than us and should have won that game. But we played better as a team, and I think they just weren't ready for the heat that game had. So that was the most satisfying one.
All right. Okay, funniest thing you've seen happen in a soccer game you were playing in at any level. It could even be down to youth soccer.
Funniest thing. I don't know if it's funny. I guess strange. When I was playing club ball as a teenager, I was probably about 16 or 17, and we were playing out in Queens. We were playing a team from Queens, and at one point, a couple of police cars rolled up to the field. They powwowed with the referee. The referee blew the whistle, stopped the game. The police came onto the field and arrested one of the players on the other team, put him in handcuffs, perp walked him over to the car and drove off, and the ref blew the whistle. The other team replaced that player with another player, and we continued the game. So that's the strangest thing that's ever happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. That's going to be a tough one to top. Okay. All right. A couple more and we'll be done. So you're the soccer commissioner, either at the collegiate or professional level, right? Name one rule you would change that you think would add to soccer's popularity.
Well, I can't tell you what I would specifically do about it. Maybe retroactive VAR reviews or something, but something to take some of the diving out of the game. Not so much at the college level, but at the professional level. It's just really cynical, and it's the bottom line is it's cheating. And I would love to see that. I'd love to see something done about that, but I really don't know exactly what to say to do about it.
I see. Yeah. All right. Last one. Best memory from that 1-0 win over Army as a senior.
Best memory. Well, the most vivid memory I have of it is literally, it was at that turf field behind 8th Wing. It was a night game. It was a cold November night. And we were ahead 1-0, and we were just hanging on. They were throwing everything at us. And when the ref blew his whistle, that was the most vivid memory I have of it, because we weren't going to withstand the pressure much longer, but we did.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Good thing it didn't go another 60 seconds, huh?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All
right. Chris, that was really good stuff. I really appreciate it. So that's going to do it for the lightning round. And thanks so much for joining us on Navy Sports Central. We really appreciate you helping us, get a little bit smarter when it comes to soccer, and also sharing your insights on this year's Navy team. I know things are pretty busy on your end, so I really appreciate you carving out the time to be with us.
Oh, hey, this was a lot of fun, Carl. I really appreciate you reaching out, and go Navy, beat Army.
All right. Sounds good, man. Thanks a lot. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Okay, that's going to do it for this edition of Navy Sports Central. Thank you all so much for joining us. Now, if you like what you've heard, remember to follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to spread the word to all the other Navy fans out there. We didn't have a question of the day today, but don't forget you can respond to the one from last week by going to our group Facebook page at Navy Sports Nation and answering it there. It's going to be posted in the announcements section. Once again, I'd like to thank my guest, former Navy soccer player Chris McKenna, for his terrific insight and analysis on the men's soccer team in the upcoming game against Army. That was a really fun discussion. And just a quick reminder, the views expressed on Navy Sports Central are my own and do not reflect those of the U.S. Naval Academy or Navy Athletics. By the way, the music used on Navy Sports Central podcast comes to you from Audio Jungle. This is a great resource for purchasing the rights to use music from thousands of artists around the world, and those we feature in our podcast will be credited in our show notes. Talk to you soon, everybody. Until next time, this is Carl Darden. Go Navy, beat Army.